click it here.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Cool.
Perfect. All right, is this thing on? Check, check, check. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out here tonight. Let's do a little set on what kind of audience we have here. So, how many people here would consider themselves technical enough to write some software code for a blockchain project or otherwise? Just a developer or technical, just a handful of those. So, all right, and so the rest of us, myself included, are more businessy, more markety, more enthusiasts for this space, trying to figure out what's going on. That's great. That's what I'm all about. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on in the world of Tezos. So first of all, why are we here? This is a meetup that Kevin has awesomely put together for us. Thank you, Kevin. Can we give Kevin a round of applause? Thank you for organizing this, sir. He is very much a guinea pig because, as he mentioned, this is the very first meetup that the Tezos Commons Foundation, TCF, has sponsored. We picked 12 of them to do over the next 3 months, and then we're going to do another 12 after that, and probably another 12 after that, but this is the very first one, so here we are. I'm Jonas Lamis, as you can see from the picture here. I am a board member of the Tezos Commons Foundation. That's a completely volunteer position. I do not get paid for that role, unfortunately. I am also the founder of a website in the Tezos world called Tezos Community, Tezos.community. I started that site last March, even before the fundraiser. I got excited about what the Tezos story that I heard from some of the VC community up in the Bay Area where I lived, and I looked at what Arthur Brightman, who is our CTO, was talking about with his white paper and the work that he had done so far, and I said, you know what, that blockchain project is going to be really interesting, and it needs a community. And so I launched the site Tezos Community. It has forums where you can, talk with thousands of other people. In fact, Tezos Community had visitors from over 100 different countries last month. So we get a lot of people coming and asking questions and learning and so forth and so on. Tezos Community is also a delegation service, and I'll talk about that in a minute, what that means. But I'm excited to be, as Kevin said, one of the OGs around here because, in fact, it has been a heck of a ride over the last year. And so I thought I'd just talk about 4 things, trying to answer what is Tezos in a fairly non-technical way. The first part is the story of the wrong nerds. Has anyone read the Wired magazine article that came out, the July cover issue of Wired magazine? In that July covered issue, it tells the sordid tale of how Tezos came to be, the troubles that we went through during 2017, the recovery that we've made since then, and Kathleen Brightman, one of her quotes in that when she was talking about the powers that were against Tezos last year, she said they fucked with the wrong nerds. And so we've taken the hashtag wrong nerds as one of our proud terms to represent ourselves. Just to go into that a bit for people who want to hear the backstory, right? Arthur Brightman, brilliant mathematician from France, marries Kathleen, now Brightman. They met at a crypto anarchists event in New York when they were working at different hedge funds. And Arthur, on the side, had been looking at blockchain projects and had come up with a notion for a third-generation blockchain technology. He published a white paper on this topic in 2014, and it was really a side project for the two of them for many years until 2016, 2017, when they raised a little bit of venture capital around it and got serious about it. They happened to do a fundraiser with a rather novel model where they started a foundation in Switzerland and hired somebody to run that fundraiser, to run the Swiss Foundation. And the whole concept was this nonprofit would take the funds that come from the community, those are donations, The nonprofit would then use those funds to drive development efforts and so forth and so on. Kathleen and Arthur's company would be separate. They wouldn't be part of the foundation. Well, the whole thing kind of went sideways, and the guy who took over the foundation, the guy who ran the foundation, ended up not wanting to use any of the money on actually what Kathleen and Arthur developed. He kind of wanted to use the money on his own projects. And so we had quite a stalemate last fall. The good news is that the Tezos Community project that I launched, along with some other community efforts on social media networks like on Riot and on Reddit and on Twitter, started to galvanize a real strong community around this issue. We were all very passionate about what Arthur had outlined, and we wanted to see it launched, and we didn't want to let it go. So during the fall and winter, we kind of built a rebellion. We nominated one of our own from the Riot group, a guy by the name of Ryan Jesperson, and we sent him to Zurich to negotiate with Johan. And at the end of the day, he ended up taking over the foundation. And so we were able to get this thing back on track in the spring. And since then, the momentum has been moving in the right direction. We were able to launch the beta net, which is essentially the almost real mainnet, in July 1st. And those people who contributed to the fundraiser were given their allocation of Tez also during the beta net. About 50% of the people who got coins through that allocation have activated them. So it's totally reasonable. Some people, like myself, are kind of, I want to get in there and start using this stuff, and so we've activated our coins. Quite a few people are like, let's wait until we know everything works right. So they're waiting until the main net, which should happen at the end of September. But over the last 45 days or so, we have seen a really awesome product, this blockchain that is Tezos, start to operate, and it's running really well. So I think it's been a really interesting 12 to 18 months for all of us, highs and lows, but we're now at a point with Tezos where we think we have something that is going to be competitive on a global scale with any other blockchain that's out there. And we have built a global community of people from more than 100 countries. We had over 100,000 visitors on the Tezos Community properties over the last couple months. We have a lot of people who are out there like you, curious about what is this project about? Why is this going to be successful? What can I do to get involved? And so I'll talk about those things in a bit here. Now, what is the killer app for Tezos? I get that question a lot. Why is Tezos interesting and not, why aren't you spending your time with Ethereum or EOS or things like that? And I'll tell you that I think there's going to be a series of killer apps that come out for Tezos over time as the technology gets more well known. But the first killer app is based on how the chain works. And Tezos uses a consensus mechanism called proof of stake. In fact, we have named it liquid proof of stake. And what that means is that where Bitcoin has these miners who run their mining operations and they use a whole bunch of energy in order to keep their ledger in sync, and as a byproduct of that, they mint new Bitcoin and make money that way. In the Tezos ecosystem, we don't have miners, we have bakeries. And bakeries use a proof of stake model, which is different than the proof of work model that Bitcoin uses. So proof of stake means that if you hold the coins, you take some of your coins and you put them up as a bond, and you run a computer to manage the consensus mechanism to keep the ledger in sync. And as a result of that, because you put up the risk, because you had the coins and put up the risk, you get rewarded for that. So proof of stake means I took some of my coins, I put them up at risk, I ran my software application, I kept the chain in sync, and I had to do that. That utility is absolutely necessary for Tezos to run. If people didn't stake their coins, if people didn't run these baking operations, Tezos couldn't exist. And so having coins and using them during this baking process is part and parcel with the chain actually being successful. And so whereas in Bitcoin or Ethereum you have one constituency that is the miners who want the chain to work a certain way, and you have the coin holders who want the chain to work a different way, in Tezos, those are one and the same. So you don't have the friction that exists on the other chains. You have the coin holders responsible for keeping the chain running, and that's called delegated proof of stake or liquid proof of stake, as we say. Now, in order to be one of those bakeries, you actually have to hold a certain number of coins. You have to hold 10,000 coins. They call it a roll. And not everyone has 10,000 coins. Now, the great thing is there are over 400 or 500 people on the network already that hold at least 10,000 coins. And those 400 or 500 people are running over 100 of these different bakeries. And so if you look at Bitcoin, which has a handful of large miners that control everything, or you look at EOS that has 23 node producers that run everything, Tezos is really decentralized. It has over 100 different bakeries that are running and producing the blocks and are running the endorsements. And so that decentralization provides a lot of security that other chains don't have. But everyone can participate in the consensus mechanism, even if you have less than that 10,000 coins. You can instead delegate those to a bakery who will take those baking rights and will bake them for you and will share the rewards back with you, okay? You're not giving up your coins, you still control the private keys and things like that, but you're sharing in the process of maintaining the blockchain and you're sharing in the rewards from it. And so that delegated proof of stake is, I think, the first killer app for Tezos. Tezos is not the only chain that has this model, but it's the first chain at scale. It's the first large chain to really show how a delegated proof of stake model is going to work. And already today, we have thousands and thousands of coin holders who every 3 days are getting rewards because they're using their coins to move the blockchain forward. So one of the interesting byproducts of this is going to be, how do coin holders decide how much of their effort they want to put into the utility of the chain and hold their coins for the long term so that they can capture those rewards and run the chain, versus how many people are going to, put them on an exchange and trade them for something else. I think with Tezos, we're going to see a much smaller float of coins because many more people are going to want to use their stake to participate in the ecosystem. And so that's going to create new kinds of dynamics as the coin grows that we're not seeing on kind of the first and second generation blockchains. And I think what that means is over the long term, you're going to see a blockchain that's a lot more stable and has a lot less volatility to it than some of the swings that we see on speculative coins that are out there. Because in this case, the coins are absolutely necessary to run the network. And it's done in a very decentralized manner. So I think when I say the future of banking, I kind of feel like, when I take my coins and I delegate them out to somebody, and that's being used to run the network, and I get a return on that, it could very well be almost like my parents, decades ago when they had a savings account, right? They put their money into the banking network, and it went to work helping other people be more successful. People took out loans on it. People bought houses on it. They got interest returned to that. It's almost what this kind of network is recreating. It's an absolute important utility for the chain to run, but it's also a way for people to see long-term gains on their holdings over time without having to trade or treat it like that. So one of our famous community members who we only know him as 0 Hour Zulu. Nobody knows who he is. Apparently, he might be in the audience because I think he's somewhere from the LA region, but he hasn't come up and shook my hand or anything. But Zero, he wrote the manifesto that we used when we ousted the foundation head. He got the petition going. He calls Tezos the proverbial last blockchain. And that sounds a bit of hyperbole, but But I think the concept is that one of the main features of Tezos, the second killer app, if you will, is that it is self-amending. And what that means is that the community gets to decide how they want the blockchain to change in the future. And the voting of whether or not to change the protocol in a certain way is done in the protocol itself. So again, the coin holders vote on, do I want to change the rate of return for baking? Do I want to add a protocol part where we could have tokens issued on top of Tezos? These are all questions that need to be managed in the core protocol, but the community, the coin holders themselves, get to decide on it. And when they decide on a change, that change then is automatically pushed in the code base into the protocol, and all of the bakers adopt that protocol automatically. And so here again, what you have is a new kind of concept of managing and governing your blockchain, different than what goes on in Bitcoin and different than what goes on in Ethereum. In both of those instances, for example, we've seen numerous fights between different parts of the developer community where one wants a block size of this and another wants a block size of that, and they end up splitting their chain and forking, and now there's two different Bitcoins, or there's two different Ethereums, for example, and then there's derivations of all those. That's not to say that won't happen with Tezos. Forking is always a possibility with any open source package, but we believe that the electoral and democratic process of, in this case, one coin, one vote, will be such that there's going to be a majority that decides the chain needs to go one way and a minority that's going to fight for their cause. But because they had a say, because they had a vote, but they couldn't get the consensus they needed to go their direction, hopefully, like US elections, they're not going to split off and create a new country. They're going to fight again on the next election to have things work. So I think killer app number 2 is this on-chain governance mechanism. And then, killer app number 3 has a lot to do with what Dre was talking about earlier. We have some really amazing languages that are smart for the smart contract building on top of Tezos. OCaml is what the protocol is written in. There's a smart contract language called Michelson that's really all about providing a lot of security for high-value smart contracts. And so when you look at this and you look at who knows OCaml, like the hedge funds in New York and the investment banks and the consulting firms, I wouldn't be surprised a couple years down the road where Tezos becomes a platform where there's a lot of assets that are managed on it that have a lot of value associated with them. How can you get involved in Tezos today? So I think there's 4 things that everyone could do today, or at least everyone could do the first 2, which is experiment with this staking mechanism that I'm talking about here. If you had $1.30, you could go online, and that's the current price, I think, of a Tezos coin. You could buy one, and you could stake it, and you could be part of this network that's providing utility for this thing to run. Once you have them, you can use that utility to perhaps create a bakery. It's a really interesting technical challenge, but it's something that I think everybody someday will consider as a possible career. Who knows? You certainly can join our communities. We have Reddit, we have Riot, we have the Tezos Community forums. And if you're interested from a developer perspective, we'd love to have you join the Baker Slack channel. You can send me an email if you'd like to. And then the core code base, which is open source, is on GitLab. So how do you get in touch with me? You can get me, Jonas, at tezoscommons.org. There's our website, tezos.community. We're Tezos Community on Twitter, and you can also see my Riot or Reddit connections.